Hello. I'm super excited. I am doing my first debt report card, and this is a debt report card that is going to cover the month of October. So October of 2017. The goal is to do these monthly, and what I want to cover, to go over my income. I'm going to go over my expenses, important things that happened in this month, and the lessons that I learned from this month, and maybe a little bit of what I plan to do in the upcoming month. So I promised you guys that I would be incredibly transparent, because in part these videos are for anyone else out there who wants to be in this place of financial peace and freedom like I want to, but also I really want to be able to look back and see how I managed this entire debt journey. And I think the best way to do that is to be as transparent as possible, because I think sometimes when we think about we're like, oh, I was only making $13 there, but then we're like, that's probably not true. But I want to document as much detail as possible, so that way the truth is just what it is when I'm looking at this a couple of years from now. So let us dive right into the October 2017 debt progress report. So income. So I had 3 different sources of income this month, and the total amount of income that I earned for October of 2017 was $2,336. $100 of that was just a love offering, or not just, but it was a love offering or a blessing that someone had given to me. They just decided to donate and give me $100. I also got $150 from my mom, and it wasn't that she gave it to me. I actually borrowed it from her because I was running a little bit behind on some things, so I'm gonna definitely have to pay her that back in the following month. And then the third way is I earned $2,086, and I earned that by participating in a study. And the study was just basically a study to test out aspirin. If you guys want me to do another video on that, I'd be happy to, but just so that you guys kind of understand, the sources of the $2,336 came from a gift, borrowing, and then me participating in a study. So my total income was $2,336. This is this is 2017. The only other money that I've earned in 2017 was $300. So I'm very excited to go from earning $300 to have earned $2,000. I'm not necessarily earning it in my chosen profession or in the way that I would want to as it stands right now. But again, this is about being transparent. And if you guys are anything like me, sometimes life happens and I am rebounding and starting over from life. And so things are not going to be all sunshine and roses. I'm going to have to sort of dig a little bit in order to start earning my full potential again. So that was my entire income for the month of October. Expenses for the month of October were $2,435.01. So if you're doing the math there, I guess I didn't do the exact math, but it looks like I'm about $100 over budget, which makes sense because, and I'm just doing this on my phone right now, which makes sense because I'm about $109 over budget, which makes sense because I actually had to go into my emergency fund this month. And at this time, what my emergency fund sits at was $300, but at this time it's down to $100. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as we're going through this progress report. So my expenses outweighed my income this month, which is the reason why I borrowed $150 and the reason why I went into my emergency fund. So let's see exactly what I spent and where I spent, because I did a terrible job, absolutely terrible job. I definitely did my budget, and the way that I do my budget, I do it in my budget binder, and I use the Dave Ramsey forms. I wrote everything out, and I'm grateful that I wrote everything out, because honestly, had I not written anything out, I probably would have done much worse than this. And we'll talk a little bit about why maybe that happened, where that comes from. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the numbers. So the place where I went over budget the most is in restaurant costs, and I had $0 budgeted for a restaurant because and this is just where I was keeping my receipts, because in my mind I shouldn't have been going to restaurants. I'm just now rebounding with my finances, but I spent $140.19. For food, I had $100, so that's over budget, $140.19. For food, our groceries, I had $100. I went over $12.78. For pocket money, I had $20 and I stayed within budget for that. For clothing, I planned on purchasing clothing for my son this month, and I had budgeted $300, and actually I'm under budget on that. I did $254.36, which I'm excited about being under budget for that, but you know, I spent in other areas. Gas, I had budgeted $120. This I went over budget, gas / transportation, because I wound up spending $221.82, and that is because during the month of October, I chose to go to my hometown and visit. I mentioned before I co-parent, and my son does not live in the city that I live in. He lives full-time with his father, and so I have been very sick this year and hadn't spent very much time with him, and I've just missed him, and so I made the decision to go to my hometown and visit. And so a lot of that gas was because of that, but the additional cost was I had to get an oil change, because like my car probably hasn't had an oil change in like 1,000 years, but I needed to get an oil change in order to be able to make it back to my hometown. In rent, originally what I had budgeted, and so I told you guys I haven't been earning income, so my rent expenses have been covered with provision, like other people have been taking care of that expenses. And this was the month where, and initially when I was doing the budget, I didn't know that this was the month where I wasn't going to be able to have that provision, but it wound up being that I didn't have that provision this month. And my rent, typically for rent, light, gas, and internet, yes, rent, light, gas, and internet, it's $1,050. And so someone else was covering that expense. They weren't covering that expense this month, and so I had to cover that expense. But in an effort to sort of just like make it a little bit easier, and because I knew I was going to be out of town for a week or so, I have a temporary roommate. So for the month of October, I wound up, instead of having to pay the $1,050, I wound up paying $900. And then the person who's staying as a temporary roommate, she's staying again for 2 weeks out of November, and so I'll have to pay half, which is $525. So I just went ahead and paid that in advance. So the $900 plus the $525 meant that rent that I paid this month was $1,425, just because it's easier for me to think about my rent being covered for 2 months than it is for me to think about it being covered for 1 month. And then so technically I was over budget on that because I did not budget to pay rent for the month of October, if that makes sense. And then I have my phone, which is $49. And then personal hygiene and personal items, I had only budgeted, or toiletries, I had only budgeted $30, but I spent $79.04. And that was the last expense that the $243 made up. So now that you guys know specifically what categories I spent everything on, let's kind of talk about like why these numbers looked the way that they looked. So there are a couple unexpected things that happened. One of the unexpected things is that I did not know that I wouldn't have provision for this month for, at the time when I did my budget, that I wouldn't have provision for the month of October, and that I was going to have to cover my rent and utilities and internet. That was unexpected. Also, it was unexpected that I was going to travel to my hometown and have the reaction that I had in my hometown. And so what I mean by that is at the top of the year, and I talk about this a little bit more on my Facebook, so if you guys are not following me there, you can definitely follow me there. But at the top of the year, I got incredibly sick. Me getting sick resulted in me experiencing severe depression and anxiety, which prevented me from being able to do any work at all. And it also prevented me from being able to go to my hometown. So like there was one time I was on a plane, severe panic attack. They had to like carry me off the plane. I tried to drive home. Like it just was a bad situation. So I could not go back to my hometown just because I would be like terribly ill to go home. However, it's been 10 months now, and I've visited once in this year. So I visited one other, that doesn't seem right, maybe twice, one other time in the year of 2017 I visited, and my son had come to Chicago to visit me a couple times. Anywho though, at this point in like my treatment, my therapy, I was like, oh, I'm feeling so much better. It should be, it shouldn't be that problematic for me to go home in terms of anxiety and stress and blah, blah, blah. So got in my car, driving home, and the first 2 days I was totally fine. Like I was just like, oh, I'm so happy, super happy to be here. By the third day, I was just having like around the clock, like panic attacks and just super anxious and super overwhelmed. And my son is in school, so he's in school all day, and so it's not like he's witnessing any of this. And by the end of the day, I'm able to manage the anxiety enough to like go out and spend time with my son and, you know, go do things with him or take him to wherever it is that he wants to go, just so we can have some quality time with each other, regardless of the like chronic panic that's happening. But I say all that to say, what was unexpected about the trip is how much I wanted to be comforted, right? Like I wanted to be comforted, but I couldn't find comfort because my hometown at this particular season of my life just makes me sick. And so the only thing that I could find to comfort me was food, which I'm a pretty lean person in general, and so food has never been like a thing for me. But I was like craving, like, and I'm not a snacky person. Like if you ask my son, if you ask my friends, like in general, like I eat kale and I like water. Like I'm just not a snacky person, but I'm just like, I want a soda, I want cookies, I want chips, I want, you know, gummy worms. So most of this like groceries was really just a bunch of like snack food that I was just shoveling in my mouth. And I didn't probably realize that that's what was happening until like week 2, when I was there, and like I would do something and then I would be like, oh my God, I gotta go get like some gummy worms. And it's just like, why do you, like, that's a weird thing to say, is that like I had this, like, you know, I'm driving down this particular street and now I want to get gummy worms. And I've never looked at like, you know, food addiction or food cravings, or I've just never paid as much attention to that. But based on the reaction that I had when I was in my hometown and the food choices that I made when I was in my hometown to satiate the anxiety that I was feeling, I realized in hindsight, I'm like, oh, you are emotionally eating. Like this is what Oprah has been talking about. Like this is what that means, because you would never choose these types of food on a if you weren't feeling these emotions at this particular time. So that sort of took my restaurant and my food budget like over budget, because of the anxiety. I couldn't cook for myself, and because I couldn't cook for myself, it just made me hungrier. But also because of the anxiety, it just made me incredibly lazy, for lack of a better expression. Like I didn't want to do anything, let alone cook. So it's just like, we have to eat. Well, I have this money, like let's go, you know, do this kind of a thing. So it was a very interesting, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it because I had money, it was burning a hole in my pocket, that I had to go get something? Or, you know, did I have money, and because I had money, I chose to comfort myself with food? Or was just the stress of it all so intense that regardless of my budget, I chose to comfort with food? I don't know, but I'm just sharing that with you guys to be transparent, that I feel like one of the reasons why I went over budget in the food category is because I was incredibly uncomfortable in my hometown. Very happy and grateful to be there for my son, but it was a great challenge psychologically and emotionally for me to be there. So that's one unexpected thing that happened. The other unexpected thing that happened is at the end of the month, I went to New Orleans, which, by the way, I love New Orleans, and New Orleans is what they call it. Love it, like completely adore it. And this was a trip that was like paid for. I didn't have any expenses associated with it, and my son and I both went to New Orleans. And but I did have money on me. Like I had cash on me because I had earned the money from the study or whatnot. And so even though everything was covered while I was on the trip, this is the first time this year that I've had money. And so I wanted to pay for things. Like I wanted to be able to buy my food. I wanted to be able to do this. And in hindsight, I realized it wasn't a matter of me like not being willing to receive. It was just like, this was the first month that I had financial dignity, if you will. If you listen to Dave Ramsey, he always talks about like there's a measure of dignity that adults need, and that's found in being financially responsible for yourself. And so not only was I enjoying myself in New Orleans, but also it was kind of like I'm coming out of this super stressful like 20 days in my hometown, and I'm going to this like awesome place that I've never been before. And it's just like there's just this opportunity to do this uptick in my dignity with respect to me just paying for small simple things. And so I was able to do that, and I think that you know had a negative impact on my budget, if you will, in terms of me overspending like in hygiene areas, because like some of the hygiene things that I bought was just better skincare. And like I bought things that I wanted but I don't necessarily need, but I bought them because I wanted to. So yeah, I just said that. But does that make sense? So it's just like, I have this money, this is something that I want. Like, it's that game that you play with yourself. It's just like, I deserve this. And it's just like, true, you deserve this, but you have a goal, and your goal is to be debt free, and you cannot use the fact that you deserve as the rationale for you deciding to no longer honor what you said that you were going to do. So there you have it. As far as debt that I paid off 0 debt, because again, I was over budget. I went into my emergency fund because again, I was over budget. So my income, just to recap, my income for October was $2,336. My expenses were $2,435. Debt paid was 0. Current emergency fund savings is $100, and the unexpected things that came up will also be documented quite a lot on the blog, as well as a few other things that I think are just important for you to know that are going to be happening for October. So until next time, that is my October 2017 debt budget report card. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.